I compared two HOA financial statements. One number was off, and the board went into panic. I was sitting at my kitchen table in Cary, North Carolina, with two HOA financial statements open side by side on my laptop. Same community, back-to-back months, same reserve fund ending balance line. On the left, $482,910. 17. On the right, for the next month, $464,167. 54. The deposits and expenses didn't explain it, but one subtotal jumped out at me like it was highlighted in red. $18,742. 63. It existed on one report and simply didn't on the next. No reversal, no note, nothing. As a compliance analyst, that's not just a typo. That's a missing step in the story. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse anyone of fraud. I drafted a polite 2-sentence email to the HOA board. Hi all, quick question on the reserve ending balance. Can you confirm how the $18,742.63 variance was treated between March and April? I hit send, saved both PDFs with timestamps, and went to bed. By the next afternoon, the financials had vanished from the online portal, the board had scheduled an emergency closed session, and an email went out to the entire neighborhood warning residents not to spread misinformation about HOA finances. That was when I realized I hadn't found a mistake. I'd hit a nerve. I didn't need to argue. I needed a paper trail. And if you want to see how one wrong number can make an entire HOA implode, subscribe and stay with me, because the real panic was just getting started. I didn't move to Cary to fight with an HOA. When I signed the closing papers on the little brick house by the artificial lake, I was exhausted. Fresh off a divorce, juggling a full-time job as a compliance analyst for a health insurer, and helping my mom transition into assisted living, I wanted one thing: predictability. The listing said, well-managed community, strong reserves, low crime. To me, that read like no surprises. I'm the kind of person who color codes her inbox. I balance my checking account to the penny. My idea of chaos is when a meeting runs 5 minutes over. So a neighborhood with polished sidewalks, matching mailboxes, and an online portal for everything sounded safe. At first it was, I walked the trail around the lake after work, earbuds in, decompressing from a day of audit reports and risk matrices. Neighbors waved. The clubhouse had a decent gym. The quarterly newsletters from the HOA were full of pictures of kids' fishing tournaments and movie night on the green. The first hint of who really ran the place came at my second HOA annual meeting. That's where I saw Trisha Van Holt in action for the first time. Blonde bob, tailored blazer, that polished smile you see on realtors' billboards. She stood at the front of the room like she was hosting an award show, not reading budget line items. Your board has been working tirelessly, she said, doing that slow sweep with her eyes over the crowd. People actually clapped. Next to her sat Mark Ellison, the treasurer. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a leather binder that looked older than half the neighborhood. He didn't smile much, but when he did speak, everyone went quiet. Numbers scare most people. Not me. They announced a dues increase due to rising landscaping costs. No breakdown, no vendor names, just a generic bar chart on a PowerPoint. In my world, if you tell a regulator costs went up, they say, show me. I raised my hand. Do you have a copy of the detailed budget available? I asked. Line items, vendor totals, that kind of thing? Trisha tilted her head and smiled like I was a child asking why the sky is blue. All of that is on the portal, Claire. We don't want to bore everyone with accounting details tonight. A few people chuckled. I felt my cheeks warm, but I let it go. I was the new divorcee in row 3, not the enemy. And for a while, life slid into routine. I paid my dues through autopay. I skimmed the monthly community updates they posted, pictures, reminders, bullet points. I didn't dig. The only consistent annoyance was the tone. Every email from the HOA board read like a press release. Trisha signing off with warmly, as if she wasn't also threatening to fine people for trash cans being visible. Then, about a year after I moved in, they transitioned to a new management company. Reena Patel showed up in my inbox as Community Association Manager. The emails got more formal, more templated. Per policy. As a reminder, failure to comply may result in fines. None of it really touched me until the first special assessment rumor started. I overheard it on the walking trail. Two neighbors I'd seen but never spoken to were griping. "They're going to hit us with another $500, one said. Something about the reserves. "Didn't they just raise dues last year?" the other replied. "They say the same thing every time. For your protection." I went home, logged into the portal, and for the first time, clicked past the glossy newsletter to the documents section. Budgets. Meeting minutes. Financial statements. My comfort zone. I downloaded a few months' worth, more out of habit than suspicion. At work, I'm trained to look for patterns, what appears consistently, what changes, what disappears. I thought I'd skim them once and move on. Instead, I found myself on a Friday night, alone at my kitchen table, spreading out PDFs on my screen like puzzle pieces. Not because I was angry, because something in the way they talked about landscaping costs and protecting reserves itched at the back of my mind. For a while, everything looked normal enough. Income, expenses, reserve contributions. Slight fluctuations, nothing alarming. I almost closed my laptop and went to bed. Then I noticed a tiny discrepancy on one line from one month to the next. Not enough to scream fraud, just off, like a skipped beat. I told myself it was probably a typo. I could have walked away right there. But people like me don't walk away from numbers that don't tell a complete story. We follow them, quietly. And for a time, it really did feel like we'd found peace here, that I could be the invisible rule follower in a well-manicured suburb. Until the HOA's version of hospitality turned into something else entirely. The first microaggression from the HOA didn't come as a knock on my door. It came as a neatly formatted PDF. A few days after that Lake Trail rumor about a special assessment, the new monthly financial packet went up on the portal. Old habit kicked in. I downloaded March and April, labeled them the way I do at work, 2026-03, FS, original. PDF, 2026-04, FS, original. PDF. Side by side, they looked identical at first glance. Same logo, same headings, same bland clip art house in the corner. But my eyes go straight to totals the way some people go straight to the dessert menu. Reserve fund. Ending balance. March, $482,910. 17. April, $464,167. 54. I traced the math. Regular dues in, a couple of capital expenses out. The swing should have been a few thousand, not nearly 19. Then I saw it. On the March report, tucked under reserve transfers, a subtotal, $18,742. 63. A neat, lonely number with no description beyond other reserve activity. On April's report, that line simply didn't exist. Not reversed. Not reclassified. Just gone. As if the story skipped a page. At work, I flag things like that all the time. Usually it ends with someone saying, "Good catch, that was coded wrong," and a corrected entry appears. So, I drafted the gentlest email I knew how to write. "Hi Reena, quick question on the March/April reserve fund reports. I'm seeing an $18,742. 63 other reserve activity line in March that doesn't appear to roll forward into April. Can you confirm how that variance was treated? No accusations. No missing money. Just, can you confirm?" Reena replied 3 hours later. "Hi Claire, thanks for reaching out. The reports are correct. The reserve balances are reconciled monthly. Please let us know if you have any other concerns." It was the kind of answer you send to someone you assume will sigh and move on. I read it twice. Then I hit reply. "Thanks, Reena. To help me understand, could you please send the detailed reserve ledger for March and April, or a brief explanation of the $18,742. 63 line item? Appreciate your time." This time, there was no same-day answer. Instead, the next morning, a new email, this one from board@LakeviewHOA.org, signed by Trisha. Dear residents, it has come to the board's attention that some homeowners may be misinterpreting financial reports posted on the portal. We want to reassure everyone that our finances are professionally managed and audited, and that online documents are for general information only. Please refrain from spreading misinformation that could cause unnecessary concern in the community. No names. But the timing wasn't subtle. I stared at my screen and actually laughed. One polite question, and suddenly I was some homeowners and misinformation. I forwarded Trisha's blast to myself at my work email, offsite backup, and added a single note. Tone shift begins here. I could have replied to all and defended myself. I could have gone on the Facebook group and posted screenshots. That's what they wanted. A loud, emotional homeowner they could write off as dramatic. Instead, I opened a blank document and titled it, HOA, Financial Questions Timeline. Date, time, what I asked, how they answered. I pasted in my emails, their replies, Trisha's misinformation message. That day, I thought I was just documenting a weirdly defensive response to a boring accounting question. I had no idea it was only their first test, and that they were about to escalate way past passive-aggressive emails. If you're already seeing where this is going, hit the like button so more people hear how one tiny question turned me into the HOA's favorite problem. Because the next move they made told me everything about what they were hiding. When that misinformation email went out, I realized something important. This wasn't just about numbers. It was about narrative control. The next few days, the social temperature in the neighborhood shifted by a few quiet degrees. On my evening walk, a couple I usually nodded to barely made eye contact. One woman from the book club stopped mid-wave when she saw me, smiled too wide, and said, "Oh,
Claire.
I heard you had some questions. You know Trisha's under a lot of stress, right?" Like I'd yelled at her in the street instead of sending two polite emails. The Lakeview Neighbors Facebook group, which I mostly used for lost cat posts and yard sale listings, suddenly had a new thread pinned to the top. Reminder, respecting our volunteer board. The post was anonymous, but approved by admin. Some residents, it said, have been bombarding our board and management team with accusatory messages about our finances. Please remember, this is a community, not a courtroom. If you don't trust the board, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you. The comments were a mix of loyalists and people just trying to sound reasonable. People need to chill. It's just an HOA. If you think you can do better, run for the board. Folks are always trying to stir drama. No one used my name. They didn't have to. In a 200-home subdivision, it doesn't take much to turn someone into that woman in the brick house by the lake. 2 days later, an envelope from Lakeview HOA appeared in my mailbox. Not the usual windowed billing kind. Heavy cream stock, HOA logo embossed at the top. Notice of informal concern. Communication tone. The subject line read. I actually laughed. Inside, in lawyer-adjacent language, they reminded me that board members are volunteers, that repeated questions about finances can be perceived as harassment, and that all concerns should be routed through appropriate channels and not individual board members' personal emails. I checked the header again. They'd mailed this first class. To address 2 emails that never even left the official HOA inbox. The message underneath was clear: stop asking. You're becoming a problem. I pinned that letter to my corkboard, just above my growing HOA Financial Questions Timeline. Date, sender, exact wording. In the days that followed, the social pressure campaign ramped up. At the clubhouse gym, I overheard Trisha's voice floating out of the conference room where she held her little inner circle gatherings. And when residents start flooding us with nitpicky questions, it really takes us away from the work we're trying to do for all of you, she was saying. Someone murmured agreement. We have professional auditors. We don't need amateur detectives. I paused at the water fountain just long enough for the word amateur to land. On the walking trail, the same 2 neighbors from before were talking louder than normal as I passed. I just think if someone's unhappy, they should move, one said. We don't need that energy here. I'd lived through gaslighting before, first in my marriage, then in corporate life. This was the HOA version, Smile while you paint a target on someone's back. What they didn't realize was that every whisper, every vaguely threatening letter, every carefully worded Facebook post was just more evidence of a pattern. I added a new section to my document: social pressure and retaliation. Screenshots of the Facebook thread, notes about dates and who said what, where. The informal concern letter, scanned and saved as 2026-05, informal concern, tone. PDF. Most people, when they feel a community turning on them, either blow up or back down. That's what the board was betting on, that I'd get flustered, fire off an angry response they could label as disruptive, or quietly decide it wasn't worth the headache. But I wasn't interested in winning a popularity contest. I was building a record. The thing about reputational warfare is, it only works if you need their approval more than they need your compliance. So I kept my replies bland, my tone neutral, my questions precise. And while they were busy spinning a story about a hysterical homeowner, I was watching their next move. It didn't take long. Social pressure wasn't enough for them, because the next envelope they sent me wasn't cream-colored. It was bright, hostile red, and tucked inside wasn't a reminder. It was a fine. They weren't just trying to shame me anymore, they were going for my wallet. And that was when I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a tactic. And tactics can be documented, dismantled, and turned right back on the people who deploy them. But the HOA still hadn't realized that every letter they mailed me, I was quietly filing it under Exhibit A, B, C. They were about to make a much bigger mistake, one with actual dollar signs attached. And once money entered the picture, I stopped giving them the benefit of the doubt. The red envelope showed up on a Thursday, jammed crookedly into my mailbox, like even the postal worker didn't like the feel of it. Violation notice, formal warning, screamed the header in 16-point bold. For a second, I honestly thought they'd mix me up with someone who'd parked an RV on the lawn. Nope. Nature of violation: harassing and excessive communications to board and management regarding financial records. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same place I'd lined up those PDFs, and read every word. They listed dates and times of my 2 emails. 2. They claimed my persistent questioning of duly approved financial reports created a hostile environment for volunteers. They warned that any further harassing inquiries could result in fines of $50 per occurrence and referral to the Compliance Committee for a disciplinary hearing. At the bottom, in calm legalese, was the part that actually mattered. Failure to cooperate may result in the placement of a lien on your property pursuant to Section 7(4) of the CC and RS. There it was. The quiet middle-class threat: we can reach for your house if you don't sit down. I read it 3 times, then checked the return address. No attorney letterhead. Just the HOA's P.O. box, Trisha's electronic signature at the bottom. They'd escalated from gossip to financial intimidation without ever answering a single substantive question. At work, we call that retaliation risk. I opened my HOA financial questions timeline document, added a new entry. May 12th, received violation notice, alleging harassment for 2 emails asking about $18,742.63 reserve variance. Threat of fines and lien. No answer to underlying question. Then I did something very boring that, in my world, is the equivalent of loading a weapon. I pulled out my CC and RS binder. Section 7. For the very clause they cited did mention liens. It also mentioned due process. Notice. Opportunity to be heard. Objective standards for violations. Financial questions was not on the list. Next, I logged into the portal. The financial section was empty. Where there had been a list of monthly packets, there was now just a single line: documents temporarily unavailable during system maintenance. Dated that morning. I actually smiled. If this had been about my tone, they wouldn't need to scrub the archive. I drafted a new email, this time with a subject line no compliance department can comfortably ignore. Subject: formal records request per Section 5(3), access to books and records. Dear Board and Ms. Patel, per our governing documents and N.C. Gen. Stat. Section 47F3118. This is a formal written request to inspect and obtain copies of the following association records for the period January-April 2026. 1. Detailed reserve fund ledgers and bank statements. 2. Vendor invoices and contracts related to other reserve activity. 3. Board minutes and any resolutions approving reserve transfers. 4. All versions of monthly financial reports posted to the owner portal. Please confirm a date and method of access within the statutory timeframe. This request is made in good faith for the purpose of understanding association finances. Sincerely, Claire Maddox. Lot 47. No emotion, just law, section numbers, and bullet points. I CC'd the generic address for the management company's ethics and compliance inbox I'd found buried in their corporate site footer. Then I printed the email to PDF and dropped it into my growing folder. 2026-05, Formal Records Request. PDF. 2 days later, Rena replied, Claire, your request is overly broad and burdensome. Owners are not entitled to internal working documents, only finalized reports. As stated previously, our finances are professionally managed and audited. We consider this matter closed. Regards, Rena. Under that, in a different font size, was the part she probably hoped I wouldn't notice. Please note, certain records may be subject to destruction per our document retention policy. I highlighted that sentence on my screen. When someone rushes to tell you what they might destroy, they're telling you exactly what you need to ask for next. I didn't argue. I forwarded her email to the management company's compliance inbox with one sentence. Per attached, local manager is refusing a statutorily permitted records inspection and referencing destruction of records under active owner inquiry. Please advise on escalation path. Then I opened a fresh page in my timeline, retaliation and denial of records. Every threat of fines, every refusal, every time they cited rules incorrectly, all of it cross-referenced to the same simple question: where did $18,742.63 go? By then, it was obvious. They were willing to manufacture a violation, threaten my home, and wipe their own portal rather than send a single ledger. That told me two things. First, the number itself was just the tip of something they really didn't want touched. Second, if they were going to accuse me of harassment for asking polite questions on email, I was going to need witnesses. I stopped thinking of this as me versus the board. I started thinking of it as me versus a process. And if you've ever fought a process, you don't win by shouting at it. You win by documenting it until it can't stand up on its own. From that day on, every interaction with the HOA went into the file, because they'd shown me their ultimate weapon was fines and liens. They had no idea that my weapon was patience. And if you've ever taken a hit from an HOA like this, tell me in the comments what they tried to use against you, because the next thing they did crossed a line even my corporate training hadn't prepared me for. If the HOA wanted to play compliance, they'd picked the wrong opponent. Up to that red envelope, I'd been reacting on instinct. Saving PDFs because that's what I do. Naming files like I was still on my company laptop. After it, I sat down and treated Lakeview HOA like I would any messy, half-scared client under audit. Step 1 in my world is always the same. Pull the rules. I spread the CC and RS, bylaws, and North Carolina Planned Community Act across my dining table like a crime board. Little sticky flags marked sections, records, enforcement, fines, liens. I wasn't looking for loopholes. I was mapping the exact path they were supposed to follow and all the places they'd already wandered off it. Section 5. 3. Owners have a right to inspect all financial and other records of the association upon reasonable notice. No carve-out for when it's inconvenient. No exception for if the owner asks too many questions. Section 7. 4. They could pursue liens for unpaid assessments and properly levied fines, not for asking why a number moved. And every enforcement action required notice, a hearing, and an opportunity to be heard before an impartial committee. They'd jump straight to threats without a single proper step. In corporate audits, We call that procedural noncompliance. In HOA land, it's the same thing, just with worse fonts. What the board didn't know is that my entire career is built on 3 skills: reading boring documents so other people don't have to, writing emails that sound bland but land like subpoenas, and waiting longer than whoever's trying to stonewall me. So I stopped poking at the $18,742.63 and started building something else. A framework. I created a spreadsheet, not for their numbers, but for their behavior. Column A. Date. B. Document or event. See what they did. D. What the governing documents say they should have done. E. Gap. March 29th, March financials posted with other reserve activity, $18,742.63. April 30th, April financials posted. Line disappears. Reserve ending balance drops. May 3rd, my first email. Vague reassurance, no detail. May 5th, portal wiped. Maintenance notice added. May 7th, community-wide email about misinformation. May 12th, violation notice threatening fines and liens. May 14th, refusal of records request, mention of destruction policy. When you see it in a list like that, it stops looking like overreactions and starts looking like a pattern of obstruction. Next, I pulled out my work laptop on my lunch break and did what I do best: research. Case law on North Carolina HOAs. Attorney General advisories. Sample demand letters. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for the sentence structure that makes corporate legal departments sit up straight. I drafted a new message, this time not to Rena or board but to the regional VP of the management company. His name was buried 3 clicks deep on their website under Leadership. Subject: Escalation. Potential statutory noncompliance. Lakeview HOA, Cary, North Carolina. In the body, I laid it out like an internal audit finding. Summary: Owner's good faith request to inspect financial records related to reserve activity has been denied contrary to NC. Gen. Stat. Section 47F3118 and Association Governing Documents. Subsequent actions by on-site manager and board appear retaliatory in nature, threatening fines/liens for inquiries, removing financials from owner portal, referencing document destruction while records are under requested review. Requested resolution. 1. Written confirmation that requested records will be preserved. 2. Scheduling of records inspection. 3. Clarification of your company's policy on owner access to association books. No adjectives. No outrageous or unfair. Just facts, citations, and numbered asks. I CC'd their compliance inbox again, BCC'd myself at work, and dropped the PDF of their own owner records access policy from a forgotten corner of their site as an attachment. Then I did something crucial in any bureaucratic war. I stopped sending anything else. At home, I made a different kind of move. I knocked on the door of the tan colonial 3 houses down, Jim and Carol's place. I knew Jim was retired, but not from what, until he casually mentioned last Halloween that he used to do some securities work. Which, translated, meant former SEC enforcement attorney. I showed up with a plate of cookies and a sentence rehearsed. Hey, Jim. Got a weird HOA question. Mind if I borrow 10 minutes of your brain? At his kitchen table, I slid my timeline, the red violation notice, and the 2 reserve statements between us. He read in silence, that particular kind of frown older lawyers get when they see something both sloppy and arrogant. You're not wrong, he said finally, tapping the $18,742.63. And their response pattern is not great. I don't want to sue anyone, I said. I just don't like being threatened for asking where the money went. He smiled, small and sharp. You don't have to sue. You just have to keep doing exactly this on paper. If they're cooking something, they'll hang themselves if you give them enough rope. I added a new line to my spreadsheet that night. May 18th, consulted retired securities attorney neighbor, advised to continue documentation, avoid emotional responses, and force issues into official channels. That was the moment the story shifted in my head. I stopped feeling like a homeowner under siege and started feeling like what I actually am, a compliance analyst with a live case. From then on, every email I drafted followed the same formula. Cite the section, state the fact, ask the yes or no question. No commentary. Per Section 5(3), please confirm preservation of all reserve ledgers and bank records from April 2026, pending inspection. At your earliest convenience, please provide available dates for records review, as required by statute. If they ignored me, that was another entry in the gap column. By the end of that week, my file on Lakeview HOA looked like something I could comfortably slide across a conference table to a regulator. And I still hadn't raised my voice once. In my world, that's the point where you stop reacting and start planning. Because now I wasn't just waiting to see what the board would do next. I was setting up the exact trap they were bound to walk into. They thought the red envelope would scare me into silence. They had no idea that, for someone like me, it was just the signal to stop playing defense and start building the case. And to do that properly, I'd need something more than laws and timelines. I'd need proof they couldn't explain away, proof they'd create with their own hands. So the next phase wasn't about what I asked them. It was about what I gave them the opportunity to do. And that meant quietly collecting every scrap of evidence I could while I dangled exactly the kind of bait no overconfident HOA board can resist. From the outside, it probably looked like nothing was happening. No Facebook rants. No yard signs. No screaming matches in the clubhouse. Inside my little brick house, it was a different story. I turned my dining table into what my coworkers would recognize instantly, an audit war room. In the center, my laptop with a folder labeled Lakeview, HOA, Live. To the left, a neat stack of printed emails, my questions, their answers, the red violation notice. To the right, a binder with tabs I'd made myself, governing docs, financials, notices, social pressure, refusals. This wasn't about catching them in one big lie anymore. It was about documenting 100 small choices. First, I locked down every digital breadcrumb. I downloaded my entire message history with Rena and the board as PST archives. I saved each email thread as a PDF with a naming convention that would make my boss proud. 2026-05-03_Q, reserve variance. PDF. 2026-05-07_board, blast misinformation. PDF. 2026-05-12_violation notice, harassment. PDF. Then I opened my browser history from the day the financials disappeared and took screenshots of the portal showing the missing documents and the new maintenance banner. Date and time stamps visible. Saved as 2026-05-05_portal before wipe. PNG. 2026-05-05_portal after wipe. PNG. At work, we say, if it isn't documented, it didn't happen. I wasn't about to let anything not happen. Next, I started asking for records in a way that forced their answers into official channels. No more quick question phrasing. Per Section 5(3) of the Declaration and NC. Gen. Stat. Section 47F3118. Please confirm preservation of all bank statements and reserve ledgers from January through April 2026 pending owner inspection. Per your company's published owner records access policy, please provide the procedure to schedule an on-site review of financial records, including contact for your designated records custodian. Every request went by email. Every reply or non-reply went into the spreadsheet. When they stalled, I noted it. No response within 7 days. When they hedged, we don't provide internal reconciliations to owners. I copied the exact sentence, pasted it into the gap column, and next to it, cited the line in the statute that said otherwise. I wasn't just collecting documents. I was building a story any outside reviewer could follow in 10 minutes. Quietly, I pulled in allies. Carol from down the street turned out to be a retired CPA. Over coffee, I slid the March and April statements across her breakfast bar. Anything jump out at you? I asked. Her finger went straight to the same number. This $18,742.63, other reserve activity. Where's the supporting schedule? That's the thing, I said. In April, it just vanishes. She frowned. Transfers like that should either reverse, reclassify, or be backed by an invoice or board resolution. If it's none of those, it's sloppy at best. Would you be willing, I asked carefully, to put any of that in writing if it came to it? She looked at me, then at the red violation notice I'd let accidentally peek out of my folder. They threatened you over this? I nodded. She sighed. Email me the statements. I'll draft a short summary. Neutral, technical. Numbers don't care about politics. One more exhibit. Jem, the retired SEC attorney, suggested I start recording dates of every closed emergency session. They called and cross-referenced them with portal changes. So I did. May 6th, board email. Emergency closed session tonight at 7 p.m. 05/06, 8:12 p.m. M. Portal shows documents under maintenance. May 7th, 9:03 a.m. M. Trisha's misinformation blast. Patterns. I also filed a simple, boring request with the county. Copies of any liens Lakeview HOA had recorded against owners in the past 3 years. When the envelope came back, I scanned and sorted those too. Same compliance committee chair. Same signatures. Same threatening language. This wasn't their first rodeo. Meanwhile, the management company's regional VP finally replied. Ms. Maddox, thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. We take owner access to records seriously. We have reached out to the on-site manager and board for additional context. In the meantime, please refrain from further direct communication with volunteer board members. All inquiries should flow through management. We will follow up. It was corporate speak for, we see smoke, but we're not ready to say fire yet. Perfect. Another layer of oversight I could loop in later. The more they tried to herd my questions into vague tone discussions, the more I funneled everything back to specifics. Per my May 20th request, please confirm whether board minutes reflect any motion or vote approving the $18,742.63 other reserve activity line item appearing in March 2026 financials. No answer. Per statute, please confirm that no records responsive to my May 20th request have been altered or destroyed. Silence. On my end, every silence was loud. Another line item in the timeline. At the same time, I started gently encouraging a couple of other owners to submit their own, very specific records requests, different angles on the same elephant. One neighbor asked for copies of all current vendor contracts and 1,099s for reserve-funded projects. Another asked for the most recent engagement letter with the HOA's outside CPA. If this really was just sloppy accounting, transparency would clear it up. If it wasn't, they'd have to work harder, on multiple fronts, to keep the lid on. All I had to do was wait and keep my hands clean. By early June, my HOA financial questions timeline was 12 pages long. Dates, quotes, cross-references. Carol's neutral memo about the missing reserve entry sat on top, like a politely worded accusation. There was only one thing missing from my file, a single, undeniable act by the board that showed they were willing to falsify or backdate a record rather than admit an error. They'd already shown me they were happy to erase documents from the portal. I needed them to create something new, something I could hold up in front of a room full of neighbors and say, very calmly, these two things cannot both be true. So I adjusted my strategy. Instead of pushing harder on what they wouldn't give me, I gave them an opportunity to correct the past. A chance to fix their little $18,742.63 problem in a way that would finally trap them on paper. And if you're still here following every step of this silent war, hit subscribe, because the bait I dangled next was exactly the kind arrogant board members can't resist, and it was the last piece I needed to spring the trap. The bait started as a draft I didn't send. I wrote an email to Rena and the board that said exactly what I knew they wanted to hear. Given the confusion around the March/April reserve reports, I'm willing to consider that the $18,742.63 entry may have been misclassified rather than missing. If revised financials are issued showing the proper treatment of that amount, I'm happy to consider the matter resolved without further records inspection.
Then I sat on it.
In my world, people under scrutiny crave one thing: the chance to rewrite the story quietly. If I push too hard on statutes and rights, they just keep stonewalling. But if I dangled a way out that required them to fix the past on paper, that's when bad actors get creative. I tweaked the wording until it sounded perfectly reasonable, perfectly neighborly, and perfectly dangerous to anyone tempted to backdate. Subject: clarification on reserve variance, potential resolution. I sent it on a Tuesday at 9:02 a.m. Prime office hours, when people skim emails between meetings and make sloppy decisions. Within 30 minutes, Rena replied, "Hi Claire. Thank you for your understanding. I'll confer with our accounting team and the board to see if any clarification or revised reports are appropriate. We appreciate your willingness to resolve this amicably. Regards, Rena." There it was, revised reports. She'd said the quiet part out loud. I saved her message as 2026-06-03_Rena, revised reports hint. PDF, and added a new line to my spreadsheet. Owner invites clarification. Manager references potential revised financials after prior denial of records. Then I did nothing. No follow UPS. No nudges. Silence is its own pressure. 3 days later, the portal blinked. The documents under maintenance banner vanished. In its place, Financials 2026. March and April reappeared, same file names as before. But I don't trust file names. I downloaded both and dropped them into a new folder. 2026-06-06_ versions. My original copies from May sat in _originals above them, like an older sibling watching a younger one try on their clothes. Side by side on my screen, the differences were subtle, exactly the kind a casual homeowner would never notice. Same logo, same headings, same clip art house. But in the new March statement, the lonely other reserve activity, $18,742.63 line had grown a friend, a footnote symbol, tiny and polite. At the bottom of the page, new text. Asterisk prior period adjustment to correct vendor coding. See April report for offsetting entry. Except April still showed the same ending reserve balance that had bothered me the first time, $464, $167.54, with no offsetting entry and no prior period adjustment line. They'd added a story about an adjustment without actually making one. More interesting was the metadata. I right-clicked the new March PDF, pulled up properties. Created, June 6, 2026, 1:42 p.m. Modified, same. My original March file? Created, March 29, 2026, 9:17 a.m. Same report title. Same month. Completely different birth dates. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. 2 official versions of the same financial statement, posted to owners at different times, with different content and timestamps. I printed both March statements in color and laid them on the table, one above the other. Original, no footnote, raw $18,742.63 hanging alone. Revised, footnote, soothing language about corrections that didn't mathematically exist. Then I printed both April's, highlighted the unchanged reserve ending balance, and circled the absence of any offsetting entry. On top of that stack, I placed Rena's email about revised reports. On top of that, my formal records request they'd refused a week earlier. Taken together, it read like a recipe. 1. Owner asks where $18,742.63 went. 2. Board panics, wipes portal. 3. Owner formally requests ledgers, request denied. 4. Owner hints she'll drop it if revised reports appear. 5. New version of March report quietly uploaded, backdating a correction that never hits April. They hadn't answered my question. They'd manufactured an answer. I was still missing one thing. Proof that this wasn't just Rena freelancing, but something the board had actively directed. I didn't have to wait long. That Sunday, a community update, important financial clarification, email went out to all owners. In response to recent confusion regarding reserve reporting, Tricia wrote, "Our treasurer, Mark Ellison, has worked with management to update the March financial packet to better reflect standard accounting practices. These changes are minor and do not affect the association's overall financial health. Please refer only to the current versions on the portal for accurate information." Minor, accurate, current versions. I highlighted those phrases, dropped the email into my binder, and wrote in the margin, "Board admits directing retroactive change after owner inquiry, instructs owners to ignore prior official report." The trap was set. They'd created dueling realities, both on HOA letterhead, both signed off by the same treasurer. Now all I needed was a room full of neighbors, a projector, and one simple question: which one of your accurate reports should we believe? When the notice for an emergency financial Q&A session hit my inbox the next day, scheduled as an open meeting to address resident concerns about reserves, I knew this was the stage I'd been waiting for. They thought it was their chance to calm everyone down. They didn't realize they'd just booked the venue for their own public audit. And that's where everything they'd tried to hide on paper was about to be read aloud, line by line, in front of the entire community. The emergency financial Q&A drew more people than any summer cookout I'd seen. Folding chairs filled the clubhouse, the air thick with HVAC and low murmurs. At the front, Tricia had set up a projector and a screen like she was about to give a TED Talk on how great we are. Mark sat beside her with his leather binder, glasses low on his nose, expression carved from granite. Rena hovered by the laptop, fingers on the trackpad. I took a seat in the third row, center. Close enough to see fonts. Far enough that they couldn't pretend they didn't see my hand. Tricia opened with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. There's been confusion around our reserve reporting, and we want to clear that up." On the screen, April's packet appeared. Bullet points.
Pie charts.
Mark launched into a soothing monologue about timing differences and non-cash adjustments. People nodded, even if they clearly didn't understand a word. I waited. When he finally said, "So, as you can see, our reserves remain strong," Tricia clasped her hands. "We'll open the floor for respectful questions. Please remember, your board is made up of volunteers." I raised my hand. Her smile flickered.
"Claire.
"Go ahead." "Two related questions," I said, keeping my tone level. "First, which March financial statement is the official one? The version posted March 29th or the version uploaded June 6th? A rustle went through the room. Mark frowned. "I'm not sure what you..." I stood up, holding a manila folder. "Rena, could you put this on the screen, please? I emailed it to the management company this afternoon." She hesitated, then clicked. "My PDF, March 2026 comparison." PDF, filled the screen. Left side, the original March reserve statement. Right side, the revised March with a brand new footnote. I'd highlighted exactly one line in yellow on each. Other reserve activity, $18,742.63. The left file, I said calmly, is the one that was on the portal until May. No footnotes. The right is the one uploaded June 6th, after my email offering to consider the matter resolved if revised financials appeared. Note the new footnote about a prior period adjustment. I clicked my little remote, yes, I brought my own, and the next page came up, both April statements side by side. Identical. Same reserve ending balance. No offsetting entry. I'd circled the totals in red. So my second question is, if March was corrected to show a prior period adjustment, why does April's ending reserve balance remain unchanged? Where exactly did the $18,742.63 go? Silence. The kind that hums. Tricia's smile had vanished. Mark gripped the edge of the table. "It's just an accounting convention," he said tightly. "You're confusing internal adjustments with official reports given to owners." I finished for him. Both labeled final. Both signed off in your treasurer's certification. Both can't be accurate if they tell two different stories about the same money. A hand went up behind me. Carol, the retired CPA. If I may, she said, standing. I'm a former public accountant. I reviewed these as a favor to Claire. What you're calling a prior period adjustment doesn't reconcile mathematically. In my professional opinion, this looks less like a routine correction and more like a post hoc attempt to paper over a missing entry. Murmurs spiked. Someone whispered, "Did they just change it?" I flipped to the next slide, Trisha's important financial clarification email, with the sentence about Mark working with management to update the March financial packet highlighted. Per your own message, I said, the board directed management to alter a previously issued financial report after an owner questioned it, then instructed residents to treat only the new version as accurate. Per NC.
Jen.
Stat. 47F3118 and RCC and RS. Owners have a right to inspect original books and records, not retroactively edited PDFs. Mark's face flushed. You are not an auditor, Ms. Maddox. You're scaring people over nothing. We have professional firms. Who I've already contacted, I said. Along with your management company's compliance office. They have copies of both versions, complete with creation timestamps. So my formal motion tonight is simple. I turn to the room, not the table. I move that Lakeview HOA engage an independent CPA, not currently affiliated with this board or management company, to perform a special audit of reserve activity for the past 2 years, that all original ledgers, bank statements, invoices, and unedited financial reports be preserved and made available to that auditor and to any owner who requests inspection under Section 5.3. And that no further fines or violation notices be issued to owners for asking financial questions until that audit is
complete.
For a second, no one breathed. Then Jim, the retired SEC attorney, raised his hand from the back. I'll second that, he said, voice carrying. And for the record, as someone who's spent 30 years looking at bad paper, I'd strongly recommend the board vote yes. It looks a lot better when you invite the audit than when it's forced on you. Eyes pivoted from me to the board. The power dynamic in the room flipped without anyone standing up. Trisha tried to recover. We don't normally take motions from the floor at Q&A sessions. Carol cut in. Per the bylaws, any properly noticed open meeting where a quorum of the board is present can entertain motions. You put this on the calendar as a special meeting to address financial concerns. These are our concerns. Rena stared at the screen, realizing, I think, that every word was being watched and quite possibly recorded. Mark snapped. This is ridiculous. You people don't understand how complex these reports are. Minor formatting changes are not fraud. We're volunteers, for God's sake. The room didn't clap. It didn't jeer. It just watched him lose his temper over a line item and 2 PDFs. I stayed standing, hands relaxed at my sides. No one used the word fraud, I said quietly. We're just asking for what our governing documents and state law already provide. Transparency. If everything is as minor as you say, an independent audit will confirm that and restore trust. If it isn't better, we find out now. A woman in the front row, someone I'd only ever seen at pool parties, spoke up. I want to know, she said. I vote for the audit. Then another. Me too. Trisha saw it. The room's center of gravity had shifted off the dais and into the chairs. She swallowed, glanced at Rena, then at Mark, whose jaw was set hard enough to crack a tooth. We will need to discuss this, she started. Jim raised a copy of the bylaws. You can discuss it right now. You have a quorum. There's a motion and a second on the floor. All you have to do is call for a vote. Every pair of eyes settled on her. For someone who lived on narrative control, this was her nightmare. The story no longer belonged to her. She picked up her gavel. Yes, she had a tiny gavel. And tapped it once, the sound small in the humid air. Fine, she said, voice thin. Board members, all in favor of engaging an independent auditor as described? Hands rose one by one. Even the compliance committee chair lifted his, eyes fixed on the highlighted screenshots behind me. Mark hesitated, then slammed his palm down on the table instead. Opposed, he muttered, which only made it clearer to everyone exactly who had the most to lose. The motion carries, Tricia announced, defeated. We'll proceed with an audit. She tried to move on, to reclaim the microphone with some soothing reassurance. But the damage was done. They'd been forced, in public, to admit there were two versions of the truth and that they couldn't explain the gap without outside help. And exposing the HOA in that room, with their own documents on a 10-foot screen, was just the beginning. Because what came next hit them where they actually live, not in their pride, but in their pocket and their power. If you've ever wished an HOA would finally face real consequences, tell me in the comments what you'd want an auditor to dig into, because the fallout from that vote was messier and sweeter than I'd even planned. In the weeks after that vote, the consequences stopped being theoretical. The first tremor hit 2 days later, in the blandest form possible, a notice on the portal. Board update. Lakeview HOA has engaged the firm Haynes & Wilcox, CPAs, to perform a limited-scope audit of reserve fund activity for fiscal years 2024 to 2025. Limited scope or not, that meant strangers with licenses and liability insurance were about to start asking the same questions I had, only with subpoena-adjacent authority. The second tremor came in my mailbox. Another cream-colored envelope from Lakeview, but this one felt lighter. Dear Ms. Maddox, upon further review, the Compliance Committee has determined that the prior violation notice, harassing communications, was issued in error. Please disregard. No fines have been or will be assessed in relation to your inquiries. We regret any misunderstanding. No apology. Just a quiet attempt to erase their own overreach. I scanned it, slid it behind the red envelope in my binder, and labeled the file, Retraction without admission. Around the neighborhood, the social weather flipped. The same people who'd parroted, "If you don't trust the board, maybe move," now cornered me on the trail. So that was pretty wild, one neighbor said. I always assumed the reports were, fine. They should have just answered you, another muttered. All this for one number? Makes you wonder what else is off. I didn't gloat. I just said, the audit will tell us, and kept walking. Haynes and Wilcox moved fast. Their engagement letter hit the portal, along with a request. Owners, if you have concerns related to association financial reporting, please submit them directly to us at. I sent them a single PDF packet, my timeline, the dueling March statements with metadata, Carol's memo, Tricia's clarification email, and the retracted violation notice. No commentary beyond. For your consideration. 3 weeks later, the board called another special meeting. This time, there was no projector. No glossy charts. Just a long table, a stack of manila folders, and 3 people in conservative suits with the calm faces of auditors who've already written their report. The lead partner, a woman about my age, did the talking. Our procedures identified multiple instances where reserve transfers were not supported by board resolutions, vendor invoices, or bank activity, she said. We also noted that revised financial statements were issued to owners without proper disclosure of the nature and impact of those revisions. She didn't say backdated or cover-up. She didn't have to. Then came the line that really mattered. We are recommending that the association restate its 2024 reserve balances, implement stricter controls, and refer certain transactions to its insurer and, if appropriate, to legal counsel for further review. Restate. Insurer. Legal counsel. Those words hit harder than anything I could have yelled. Within a week, the management company posted its own announcement. Effective immediately, Coastal Community Management will no longer be providing services to Lakeview HOA. We wish the community well. No explanation. Translation. We're not going down with this ship. At the next board meeting, Tricia's chair was empty. A short, shaky statement had gone out that morning. Due to personal reasons and increased work commitments, I am resigning from my position as president, effective immediately. It has been an honor to serve. Mark didn't even bother with a letter. The agenda simply noted, treasurer position vacant. The rumor, later quietly confirmed by Jem, was that the association's insurance carrier had demanded his removal as a condition of continuing coverage. The compliance committee chair stepped down 2 days later. Health issues. Funny how everyone's health deteriorated right after the audit. Financially, the hit was brutal. The audit invoice alone ran 5 figures. The insurer's deductible for whatever further review uncovered wasn't small either. And then there were the professional fees for the new management company the owners demanded, one with a written, owner-friendly records policy and zero patience for creative accounting. At the follow-up meeting, the interim president, a soft-spoken engineer who'd been dragged into service, read out the new protocols. All financial statements will now be posted with a version number and date stamp. Any revisions must be clearly labeled as such, with an explanation of the change. Original versions will remain accessible. Owners may request in-person review of books and records by appointment. No questions asked, per statute. The room actually clapped for per statute. As for me, my harassment file turned into something else. The new board quietly asked if I'd be willing to chair a temporary governance review task force to help rewrite the records access policy. I said no. I'll send you a memo, I told them instead. Use what you want. I just want my evenings back. On my way out, one of the newer board members stopped me. I'm sorry for how they treated you, she said. We should have listened sooner. I shrugged. You listened when it counted. Outside, by the artificial lake that had seemed so peaceful when I moved in, the sunset hit the water in straight, clean lines. The funny thing about consequences in a place like this is that they don't arrive with sirens. They show up as vacancies on a board list, as restated numbers on a PDF, as a management company quietly backing away from a contract. The HOA wanted to use fines and liens to scare me into silence. In the end, the only thing I ever really used against them was their own paperwork. And if this whole bureaucratic slow burn has hit a little too close to home, hit the like button because the last loose thread in this story wasn't about money at all. It was about what that insurer did next, and the letter I got that proved this little war on my street had landed on someone's desk far beyond carry. The letter that landed in my mailbox 3 weeks later wasn't from the HOA or the new management company. It was from an address in Charlotte I didn't recognize, on heavy white paper with a logo I did. The name of the insurer that underwrote Lakeview HOA's directors and officers policy. Dear Ms. Maddox, it began. We are writing to acknowledge receipt of materials you and other owners provided in connection with recent questions regarding Lakeview Homeowners Association's financial reporting. I read it twice. They thanked me for my thorough documentation. They confirmed that, based on the independent audit and supporting owner submissions, they had opened a claim under the HOA's policy and were conducting a coverage review related to potential mismanagement of association funds. One line made me sit down. Please be advised that any defense costs and covered losses arising from this matter will be evaluated under the association's policy and may impact future insurability and premiums. Translation: whatever mess Mark and Tricia had made wasn't just embarrassing anymore. It was going to cost them, personally, reputationally, maybe professionally. I slid the letter into my binder behind everything else. The file that had started as my own little shield had become, apparently, part of a much larger case. After that, life in Lakeview got quiet. The new management company posted financials with version numbers, just like the audit recommended. March 2026 now had an asterisk that actually meant something, restated per independent audit. The $18,742.63 sat where it should have all along, tied to a specific invoice, no longer floating in other reserve activity limbo. The social temperature reset. The Facebook group went back to lost dogs and plumber recommendations. No more anonymous posts about respecting volunteers. On the walking trail, people didn't avoid my eyes anymore. They waved. A few stopped to ask how my mom was doing or how work was. The troublemaker label had quietly been retired, replaced by something more useful: the neighbor you maybe run a weird bill past before you pay it. I stayed out of the new board's way. When they emailed asking if I'd consider running for treasurer, I declined. I'm better in the back row with a highlighter, I wrote back. But I'm happy to look over any new policies before you vote on them. They took me up on it. The rewritten records policy fit on 2 pages, in plain English. No vague, at the board's discretion clauses. Clear timelines.
Clear rights.
At the next annual meeting, the interim president stood up where Tricia used to stand and said, simply, "If any owner wants to see how your money is handled, we'll show you. No attitude, no games." People clapped, not for a personality but for a process. When the meeting ended, Jim caught my eye. "Happy now?" he asked. "I'm satisfied," I said. Happy is for places that never needed an audit in the first place. He chuckled. Places like that are rarer than you think. He's right. Most people don't have the time or the tolerance to wage a war of paper cuts with their HOA. They're tired. They just want to mow their lawn, pay their dues, and not get threatening letters about imaginary violations. That's what the Tricias and Marks of the world count on, that you'll be too busy or too intimidated to say, calmly, "Per our governing documents, please provide," and then wait them out. I didn't blow up their world. I just refused to accept because we said so from people who were supposed to be temporary stewards of a neighborhood, not its rulers. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But for those who know the system from the inside, they know there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and watch